For me personally, I tweeted this out the other day. Like, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to Disney Lorcana.
I wanted to play a deck that could win every game. And I think that Ruby Amethyst doesn't have many strengths anymore, but it also doesn't have many weaknesses.
In many of those events, you were intentionally drawing because it was securing your spot in top 8s or top 4s. And there were a lot of players out there that were frustrated by the undefeated players doing this.
One thing I'd change about set championships is how inconsistent the experience was from store to store.
I think just to like take a moment to learn from that, there is there's a lot in life that people hope for, right? Like you're hoping for something to happen. You weren't hopeful. You're like, no, like I'm going to make this happen.
It was wild. I signed up for so many because I just really didn't believe that I'd be able to win one. I know that there's people that signed up because they're just gonna go crush every store. I was not that guy at all. All
right, everybody, welcome back to the Forbidden Mountain. Today we have a very special guest, the one, the only, the gamer, Eric Switzer. How are you doing this morning, sir?
I am so good, Dan. Thanks.
That's awesome. So we're here to discuss set championships, and you have a particular fame to them because it's hard to disprove this.
Right.
I believe you're the first player to win 4 stitches in 48 hours.
You can't have a world record unless you claim it.
That is actually very true. Man, did you actually clock it? I mean, that's awesome. Could you imagine that going into like the Guinness Book of World Records? That would be hilarious.
I heard it's not hard to get records into the Guinness Book of World Records, so maybe I should do it.
I have too, and there's also like a lot of people that like promote it all the time. So like you may as well. Like listen, like publicity is publicity, man. Like if you get in there, I don't know how many Lorcana World Records there are, so you might be the first.
That could be another world record.
There you go. There we go. So for everyone here, you are. I purposely copied your buddy because I thought it was hysterical.
Yeah,
but go ahead. You're good. Go.
You know that meme, right? That happened to my buddy Eric.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, that's me. I'm the guy it happened to.
There you go. So 4 stitches champion 1 weekend. Like briefly tell me about that experience.
It was wild. I signed up for so many because I just really didn't believe that I'd be able to win one. I know that there's people that signed up because they're just gonna go crush every store. I was not that guy at all.
But you were that guy.
It turned out I was. I thought I needed every chance because the idea of not getting a stitch after how much I've put into this game was just unacceptable to me. So I signed up for as many as I could, and I got one on the first try, and I thought the rest of this is just going to be fun. But then I had the eye of the tiger, and I couldn't back down, and I had to go for it.
I love it.
And suddenly winning was in my nature, and I just had to keep going. So
that is cool. That is awesome. Now the interesting thing, what is crazy about set championships is that these were very localized in a way. Like some players travel 2-3 hours, maybe even 4 hours to play in certain events, but you come from Southern California, right? So discuss to me about like the community of the Southern California gamers.
It's interesting because like there's so many stores. I mean, you could play Lorcana every night of the week twice if you wanted to. But it's SoCal, so if you want to go anywhere, if you want to go down the street to get groceries, it's a 20-minute thing, right? Like the traffic is real, like the reputation is real. So even though I have all these stores I can go to, it's not easy to get to them. And the store that I went to on the first night in Riverside, that's 45 miles away, but it took me almost 2 hours to get there. That's just like the nature of this place. So I ended up signing up for 2 stores that were out in Riverside County, and got a hotel that night so that I could not have to drive so far to get home. Even though it is in driving distance. Everywhere I went was in driving distance of my house. I didn't travel to another state or something, but yeah. So I did have to get a hotel that first night to play my first 2 games,
which you didn't even end up sleeping in.
which I didn't even end up sleeping in. That's true, man. Yeah.
Shout
Yeah.
out to our friends, Citizens Lorcana, right?
Yeah, I bunked up with the Citizens of Lorcana, but James Riley's got he saws logs, man. There's no nice way to say it. And so that first night, I top forward. I finished up as about 3:30 in the morning by the time I got to that motel, and I got about a half hour's sleep before I woke up to the sounds of James being murdered. And I had to bail out. I thought I made the decision that I was not going to be able to play any of these games if I couldn't sleep just a little bit.
I think you're right.
I didn't think I was going to make it through the weekend. So yeah, so I bailed out and I curled up in the backseat of the car, and I got like 3 hours of sleep, and that was enough.
So I think the subject of set championships have been honestly like far and wide. For me personally, I tweeted this out the other day. Like, I think it was the best thing that ever happened to Disney Lorcana.
Yeah.
I think the excitement around the game has been at an all-time high. Going to these stores, meeting, honestly, for even in my area, which I try my best to go to as many events as possible, I met a lot of new players. Players I had never seen before, never met before, never had spoken to before. And there were, these variations of vibes going on. And a portion of your article came out interesting to me. For anyone that hasn't read it yet, I'll have it in a link in the description below to the game article about your whole story here. But you wrote this tension around success at a store that you weren't, super familiar with. Talk to me about, what it's like to be in that position and how you kind of navigated through it.
It's such an interesting thing with Lorcana. I think card games come and go, it seems, and people will try out new ones, but there's a core TCG community. And what's so interesting about Lorcana is that it feels as though the core of this community is new to card games. It seems like, I'm sure people started playing One Piece who never played card games before. I'm sure those people exist.
Absolutely.
But in Lorcana, there's so many of us, myself included, who don't come from a TCG background. So there's a lot of parts of the culture. There's a lot of norms in TCGs that these new players are kind of button up against. And so, what I experienced with the set championships was a lot of people that were resentful when there were players there who weren't the regulars. It felt like in their minds, this was a store championship. This was an event for them and their people. And when these outsiders were coming in from somewhere else, they didn't belong there. And it wasn't fair that they were competing for these prizes that should have belonged to them. And, and to an extent, of course, I totally get where they're coming from. They have their community at their store that they see every week. And all of a sudden there's these other people there trying to compete for these prizes that they thought belong to them. So it seems like we come up with Lorcana being so new, we come up against things like that a lot. We come up against things where people don't know the culture of trading card games, or don't like aspects of it and don't want it to be part of Lorcana. And I think it's interesting to see how Lorcana, our community, is going to build, how we're going to accept ideas from the broader TCG and how we're going to form our own path too.
Right. I agree. I think it's so difficult for the average player in general, right? A lot of the way that this would have been, set championships may have been presented might not have been as clear as the newer players were expecting it to be.
Yeah.
If you're just a league casual, if you're a casual night league player and you go to your store every week and you play your games and you have your community and you've been building it for months and months and months, and then you hear about this new thing, you're like, oh, there's this cool new prize that we get to play for. That's awesome. I can totally understand a world where you can be very upset when all of a sudden there's 10, 15, 20 new people in a room trying to take what you felt like was yours.
Yeah.
But the funny thing for me is how interesting it can be from the smaller tournaments to the larger tournaments where, listen, if your store only has 5-6 people that show up every week, you can fire a league because it's just a fire casual league. But for the set championships, you needed 8 players.
Yeah.
So if you're a smaller room, like you actually needed 5 or 6 more people to show up so you could even technically be eligible to play for the Stitches, which I always find really interesting.
Yeah.
Good.
And it's I think that it's interesting that you could play Lorcana from the very start, from the beginning of chapter 1, and only ever have a casual experience with it.
Absolutely.
I mean,
I think that's, but also, I mean, these were the first official tournaments for Ravensburger. Like, yeah, we've had Gen Con, we had PAX Unplugged, we had a couple other things that they had participated in, but realistically, this was the kickoff to official organized play. And with that, for what it's worth, brought a lot of new players to the game. Not new players to card games, but new players to Disney Lorcana, because history repeating itself, One Piece promos are enough to showcase that any person playing a game goes, oh, it might be worth going to check that out.
Exactly.
But I guess, like, you did a really good job of navigating the situation, right? You had taken a moment to think about it, process where you were and how you could kind of react to the room and put yourself in a better position, kind of make everyone around you feel a little better. And, why did you feel it was important for you to do that at this particular store?
Because I have anxiety. No, it was very obvious that this was a really close knit community, that it was all boyfriends and girlfriends and brothers and sisters and moms and dads. And they all knew, and to them, this was just another day at their league. It just happened to be on a Saturday instead of a Tuesday.
Sure.
And they were really uncomfortable with me being there, and it was making me uncomfortable. And I didn't want people, I really just didn't want to give people the impression that I was this like shark coming in to take their cards from them, even though like that I won that event. Like that is what I was doing. But I think like it is important in those situations to blend. It is important to like try to create a good experience wherever you're playing, whoever you're playing with. Like, I think that's a beautiful thing about this particular game is like, we can be a friendlier, safer, more accepting community. Like we kind of already have that in like the DNA of being Disney people.
So true. Oh, that's funny. So let's talk a bit about your particular deck here. So you're a Ruby Amethyst gamer, and before we go any further, why always classy?
Completely honest, I don't like Josh Gad. That's all it is.
Oh,
yeah, I'm not a fan.
man,
I just don't like him.
The first time I've heard that argument. Okay. That's like deep cut hate. All right. So talk to me about Ruby Amethyst. Why are we a Ruby Amethyst gamer?
So in a field so wide, there are so many decks being played, and every deck's got good matchups and bad matchups. And if you run into the wrong deck, sometimes some decks just have pretty much auto lose matchups. In my opinion, I wanted to play a deck that could win every game, and I think that Ruby Amethyst doesn't have many strengths anymore, but it also doesn't have many weaknesses. And if my skill was the biggest factor over the matchup, then I felt like I was in a good spot. So so I picked a deck that I thought I could beat any other deck I came up against.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, for what it's worth, the data proves that Ruby Amethyst was a legitimately good pick in both weekends so far through all reported events. It was the winningest deck for winning championship playmats. And granted, that's not every tournament ever because not everyone's reporting everything ever. But on average, the conversion rate for Ruby Amethyst for winning tournaments was really good. Top 8 Stitches. So I do think that I completely agree with the statement of I really just want it to have a chance.
Yeah.
Right. Like I know there was one game through 2 weekends of me playing that I felt like it was the only time that anyone ever like really blew me out. I'm just like, okay, that was the one game. That's fine. We'll move on. But on average, you're in every game. You have the tools within Ruby Amethyst to even make the decisions to play towards your enemies, right?
Yep.
And I think that that's really important too. Like your version here had the mini surfers, it had the castles. You know, you did have the Scar, which is a little bit different. You know, like it was a card that was coming out more and more recently, but it wasn't like everyone was always expecting you to be playing Scar scenario.
Yeah.
So there's this version, right? But then there's versions that don't even have Minnie Mouses. There's versions that don't even have Be Prepareds any longer. You know, there's versions with 10 or 12 one drops. So I think that that's the most intriguing thing here is that you played to your strengths. Why were you in particular like on the Minnie Mouse Castle plan? Did you feel like that was just more your style? Where are we at with her?
So I went through a lot of iterations of this deck as I was getting ready for this event, and I tried all the things that you try to put in this deck: the fish hooks, the spell books, the Prince Eric's, the teeth, and so many of those tech options are really great in certain matchups. And I think it was working with Zach Biven convinced me to just play the best cards because
love to hear it. Shout out to Zach.
Shout out to Zach. Helped me tremendously to get in the right headspace for these events. And yeah, it just came down to like, I could tech for this. I could tech for that. I could try to play better into the mirror match. But if I just play the best cards, then I'm going to be even across the board. And it's just going to come down to my skill piloting it. And it did. It totally did.
Love to hear it. All right, sir. So on the channel, I love playing a little game called Repeat After Me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say a statement, then you're going to repeat the statement and include your answer to it. Cool?
Sounds good.
Lorcana set championships were important to me because...
Lorcana set championships were important to me because I proved to myself that I can play competitively. I had no competitive experience at all. People say that my LGS is sweaty, like in my area. But this was the first time I ever learned that I could play competitively and be successful. And like I was saying before, with what I've invested in my time, my money, and my career into this game, it was really important to me to have results, to get some payoff for this. And this, it was so important for me to prove that to myself.
Let's touch on the importance. You are an author on the game. You're if no one knows on the gamer, you write I don't even know how many articles a week
for
Lorcana specifically, but enough. Why did you feel like you kind of had to add like the credibility to your name?
Yeah. I mean, I try to, a lot of my work, I try to give advice and insights into the game and have opinions about the meta. And, who am I to tell other people what's good in this game? And I think whether anybody ever knows that I accomplished this, at least for myself, I can be a lot more confident when I say, this card's good, this deck's good, whatever it is. Like I do have more faith in myself and my ability to analyze this game.
There is no better feeling than winning a tournament.
Yeah.
So putting yourselves in a position in the first, official organized play events for Ravensburger and saying that, hey, I won one of those. It's a great accomplishment.
Yeah. Thanks. I don't. I know that there's a competitive level to these store championships that's not transferable to something like the DLCs, and I have no delusions that I'm going to go top 8 in Atlanta next month. But I'm going to compete.
Never say never, man. Never say never.
Yeah. I worked really hard for it. I I worked with a coach. I played every day. Like I played 3 times a week out at stores all season. Like it was something I worked really hard to achieve. So
We're
it's
gonna go back to
important
the
to me.
coaching in a second here, but let's continue with our game. One thing I'd change about set championships is
One thing I'd change about set championships is how inconsistent the experience was from store to store.
ooh,
I found a lot of house rules being played from
oh
store to store, and really just store owners who were running the events the way they wanted them to be run. And I know that there was some flexibility when it came to like how many players you have, and then how many top cut players that would lead to. And
right. There was like a whole pamphlet that came out that showcased the rules and everything like that.
Yeah. But I think that it's really important for these events to be as standardized as possible. They need to be the same thing at every store, because it's not that store's championship; it's the set championship.
Right. Well, yeah, it's funny because like there was like this mixed report of store championship versus set championship, and I think that's also maybe where the mix between casual and competitive went and things like that. Who
Yeah.
knows? But yeah, I mean, when you get sent your package with the stitches and you open it up and you see this pamphlet and it gives you these are the rules of set championships, I think we should do our best to oblige, right? And listen, this is up to the store owners, right? Like, if you don't want to have a 6-round tournament on a Tuesday night, then cap your tournament. Like
Right.
that's okay, right? Like, no one's forcing you to do that. So just know where you want to be. I heard so many stories. I know I read in your article like about cutting off rounds. Like
Yeah.
that's unacceptable. In the middle of a tournament, it's one thing if you said like before the event started, hey, because of blah blah blah, we're gonna do X. Like that's kind of okay. It's still not great, but it's better than saying, oh, we're in the middle of the tournament, so we're just gonna like delete a round. Like,
Yep.
no, don't. Let's not do
Yeah.
that.
Deleting around, no top cuts, just
Yeah.
Swiss. Yeah, stuff like that. Like even stuff like who gets to go first in top 8. Is it based on your seed, or are we rolling for it? Like that was different at every store.
Yeah, and some of that we can put on Ravensburger since there's not official rules on it. So like every tournament organizer kind of like can do whatever they want with that.
Mm-hmm.
I know I only played in 4 events, but only one of them had the seed thing, and it was just like no one really cared, but that's what it was. We're like, okay, like that's what it is. Whatever. All right. So as someone that's kind of behind the curtain a little bit here, tell me, it's so it's so difficult keeping cards a secret because
it's so difficult keeping cards a secret because it's a lonely place to be.
So true.
These days I don't have them that long, but at the start, like when I got the first starter decks, and I made that video with Ryan Miller, it was over 2 months that I had physical cards, unrevealed cards, just in my office that I could just play. I could just goldfish, and I could, it's you want to share that joy with people, and of course you got to follow the rules. I would never want to ruin like a
relationship. Right.
But it's so hard to know, especially when it's like these days when it's a card that's like really going to change stuff. Like I got to reveal Sing Together
exactly
last week. And sitting on that, and the day before, they had revealed the Ariel that sings for 7, and there's so much speculation. What's the 7 cost song going to be? And I knew it was more than that. It was something bigger than that.
Right.
So it's fun, but it is frustrating.
It's definitely fun to sit back and watch all of the guesses. Like me, I love getting our spoilers and then just like putting tidbits out there. I have so much fun with that because I love seeing people react, get involved, get engagement. Like I think it's so much fun. And it is really comical to like see these bigger pictures thing. Now you have the ability, you had sing together, right? Like there's a brand new mechanic in the game, and if I remember correctly, you've done this. I think for most of the sets, you've had kind of like something new,
Yeah.
right? Invested. So that's one of the the nice things about finding that relationship in 2 months before the game had ever even come out,
Yeah.
and then kind of sticking through with it and going, hey, like this is me. I want to be here. I'm invested. I think that's all really important. But it's so cool, to see that full circle, put that work out there. I know as an author, like you're very, I mean, I assume you respect your own work so much. So when you can see people get excited about it and read through it, and then it's got to be like a real nice sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, it's great. It's something that I made a decision, at D23 that the gamer's going to be a Lorcana website. We're going to take the authority on this, and when people are looking for a game website that covers Lorcana, we're going to be the site. Just based purely on those 7 cards we saw at D23. Like I knew that we were going to be all in on this. And so, yeah, and it's great now to have that relationship with Ravensburger where we get to do cool stuff together. It's really great that we are now at a place where I think that people that play Lorcana either know the gamer for it or have used our resources before. I like just at these set championships, I went to 8 different stores, and everywhere I went, people knew me from that video with Ryan Miller or have seen my articles. Like, yeah, that's so cool that I get to support this community like that.
Love to hear it. Last one. The thing I love about Lorcana most is...
The thing I love about Lorcana most is collecting. I am such a little pack rat. I do not have space for all the things I love to collect because I have a real problem. And before it was Pokemon, it was all things Pokemon. I have so much Pokemon stuff, but I'll collect anything, and I just love. I have 5 of every card that exists, and I don't think I'll ever stop doing that because I got to put my energy into something.
I gotta just confirm, not 5 of every enchanted, right?
No, I don't have 5 of every enchanted. No,
right, I had to confirm. I'm like, that would be pretty nuts. Like,
oh, that would be scary.
Like, oh boy. Like, all right,
yeah,
we really are a gamer. All right, so the second game we like to play on the channel is Would You Rather. I'm going to give a couple of these. We're going to just talk through them. You're going to choose one. You're going to tell me why. Cool?
Yep.
All right. So, would you rather Rise of the Floodborn or Into the Inklands, and why?
I'd rather Into the Inklands.
Okay.
And I would be shocked if anybody said otherwise. Right now, like, it's really weird. I almost don't want a new set to come out. I mean, I do. Of course I do.
Yeah.
But right now it kind of only feels like things could get worse. It's incredible that we went from such a horrible 1-deck meta to such an amazing 9-deck meta. Like,
I just filmed this week's meta report. In last week's set championship, there were 12 different ink combinations that top 8 events. That's insane.
It's unbelievable. And I don't have a card game background, but people tell me that that's not normal. You don't, no. I mean, I know Pokemon, and in Pokemon there's 3 decks and then a 4th spoiler deck. Like that's all, like that's a good meta for Pokemon.
Yeah.
Is when you have 3 decks people can play, and we have 12. Like,
it's crazy.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I like, it feels like it can only get worse. I don't know. I guess there's an argument to be made that like 5 good decks is better than 12 good decks.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really tough. As a competitive player, it can be really frustrating because most competitive players are trying to find the perfect deck that beats as many things as possible and then like isn't worried about enough. And in this game, it feels like every deck probably honestly has some form of like 2 or 3 matchup weakness.
Yeah.
So people on average are more afraid of just going to a tournament and predicting the metagame wrong, and that is very difficult to predict the metagame correctly when it is this wide. So there'll be a lot of like complaints and things like that about like, hey, my deck was really good, but I played my worst matchup, so like we'll never know. And I can see the frustration there, but I also personally I love the idea that I don't feel forced. You know, in Rise of the Bloodborne, in every single competitive tournament I went to, I felt forced and obligated to play Ruby Amethyst. Like I was just like I feel dumb not to, like, honestly.
Yeah.
And into the Inklands, I could say that I currently have like 6 decks built, and I would play any one of them on any given night of the week and feel great about it. So
yeah.
I'm with you. Into the Inklands we go.
Of course, yeah. And you can still feel the meta shifts happen. It's not just like there's 12 decks and you have no idea what's going on. I mean, like we went through a Ruby Sapphire boom, and now we're in an Emerald Steel boom. Like, yes, every deck's getting played, but you can feel those waves and you can try to ride them to the best of your ability.
I agree. All right, so our next one, let's have some fun.
Ooh.
Let's talk about some cards that you got to reveal here. So tell me, would you rather dig a little deeper or look at the
Wow, tough one.
I know.
Yeah, really.
I don't ask easy questions here all the time.
So I'd rather dig a little deeper.
Okay.
And obviously I've thought about these cards a lot and which ones are viable and which ones feel like maybe they're just kind of co-op cards.
Sure.
Dig a little deeper feels viable because you're ramping so hard in blue. Like, more expensive songs are just more playable naturally. That 8 means that your Hiram and Tala can sing it.
Yeah.
You know? And that ability to go, is it 7 cards deep and take 2 of them. The family is cheaper for a similar effect, but I think because of what you're already doing in Sapphire, I think that card could be playable. 8 costs uninkable is pretty brutal, but I think that could be the playable one between the two.
I think what it enables is really awesome. I mean, this idea that I can't tell you how many times I played against Ruby Sapphire over the last 2 weeks where they developed their brain like to death, and how far I go into death, and like they're just like, oh, I cannot find the card or answer that I'm looking for. And dig a little deeper, obviously way bigger investment, but 7 cards is that's a hefty version of your deck in one setting.
Right.
So I definitely think it's going to enable at the very least in those ramp strategies some definitely playability, which is cool because there are a lot of really fun cards. And also I'm a huge fan of silver bullets. So being able to play like these one uninkable cards kind of like here and there, I think is great. So I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah,
I'm with you. As much as I'm an Encanto stand here, dig a little deeper seems to be the more playable one.
You know, when your decks, when the archetype like lives or dies on finding a dime, and you can only run 2 dimes in the deck because it's too risky to run more, it makes sense that you're going to want a card that can more accurately find those dimes when you need them.
Completely agree. If we take the card text off the question here, which song is better?
Look at his family for sure.
Absolutely.
I had to go. I had to go look up Dig a Little Deeper because I couldn't even remember it.
Yep, I'm with you. Absolutely. Look at This Family is a better song. All right. Last one. Choose one. Snuggly Duckling or Ursula's Garden.
These are cards I thought about a lot too. So I'd rather Snuggly Duckling.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sold on this card. I'm not 100% sold on either of them yet.
Sure.
But I find that as the reveals are coming out, whenever I see a new card, I find myself thinking, is that going to work with Snuggly Duckling? Like, I want to find a place for it. It does feel like a build around as much as a 2-cost location can be a build around.
Right.
That it's the 9 willpower and it's the flexibility of being able to put so many different characters there and getting the lore from them. The whole Ruby identity of challenging to get lore just hasn't come together. I don't know if it will, but like it won't unless we get more pieces, and this is a new piece.
It
So
sure as hell seems like they're trying, right? I mean,
they're trying.
Like, my God, are they trying? Yeah, it's really tough. There's so many cards that just tack on to the, hey, you get this awesome Voltron ability for challenging.
Yeah.
But I do think there's not enough cards that just simply allow you to challenge.
Right.
So I really think that's going to be the cog. I think like if there is ever a Pinocchio that's inkable, like that makes sense, or if there's ever a pick a fight, that makes sense, like the characters that these are on are either expensive or they're uninkable, their stats are bad. Like there eventually has to be a cog. And I do think Snuggly Duckling makes it interesting because gaining that much lore is that might be worth the cost, and 9 willpower is not something that we just easily get rid of.
Yep.
So I'm with you. I'm quite interested to see if it does work out. I know there's so many people out there that like hopes to God it does also.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about that card, and you're totally right. Like the characters and the actions that initiate challenging are just. It almost feels like if they were playable, they'd be too good.
Yeah.
Like it's just this like line that you can't quite.
Yeah, I always talk about synergy versus power, like a bunch when like deck building, and there is so much synergy here, but it just has not correlated to power.
Yeah,
and I think that's the biggest problem is like we're eventually going to get to a point where something hits, and it's like, yep, there it is. Like it seems inevitable, right?
Right. Yeah, but, with so much they're putting into it.
Yeah. There's got to be a payoff eventually. Well, maybe Duckling is it. It's hard to say. All right, sir. I have one more very specific question before we move forward. We touched on it a little bit here, but when you had this opportunity, you said you went to D23, you got a ground floor start and saying, man, I love this game. I want the game to be a part of this game. What was it like to actually, I guess, get the news like, hey, this is going to happen?
Yeah.
What did that feel like?
It wasn't a like opportunity that got offered to me. A lot of times my whole job is just a PR person reaching out and saying, hey, we're doing this thing with press. Do you want to do this? Okay. In this case, I was pursuing exactly that video for so long.
Yeah.
Just like I met Ryan for the first time at D23. I did an interview with him, just recording it on my phone on the floor of D23. And from that moment, I was like, we're going to do this video together. I'm going to make it happen. So I don't have a lot of experiences like that in my career. I've done a lot of really cool things, but they're things that, Pokemon said, hey, do you want to go to Japan for Worlds? And I said, okay. And then I got on a plane. Yeah. But this was one that I made happen. So like that's a huge, definitely a huge milestone for my career. And because I love this game so much, it was something that was so important to me. And I'm so grateful to Ravensburger to finally saying yes to that. But man, like I went out and got a studio. I hired a crew. I got equipment. Like I pulled on a lot of threads from my old film career and put this whole thing together. And I was just like, all Ryan has to do is show up, and I'll take care of the rest. And we pulled it off. It was awesome.
I think just to like take a moment to learn from that, there is, there's a lot in life that people hope for, right? Like you're hoping for something to happen. You weren't hopeful. You're like, no, like I'm going to make this happen. Right. And I think that's like a super lesson learned that, anything is possible. You can really truly make what you want happen in those moments. And like total mutual respect to getting that done. I think that's incredible.
Thanks, man. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Like I feel the same way about the set championships. If we can bring it back,
right.
Like a lot of people hoped to win a Stitch. A lot of people paid their $35 and showed up at their store and they hoped they would win. But I think a lot of the people that won worked for it. Like they said, I'm gonna get that stitch, and they put the time in, and they made sure that they were best positioned. They didn't just show up and hope to do well. Like they worked for it.
I totally agree. And speaking of working for it, who is Eric Switzer, my friend?
He's a gamer. He's a lover. He's a fighter. He's a friend.
He wears a heart on his sleeve.
That's right. Always does.
That's good to hear. So we talk about pursuing your goals, right? And we have these goals that you hit. You know, you got that video, you got that stitch, you got that playmat. We talked about the hard work and effort, and you had mentioned coaching earlier. Shout out to Zach Bivens again. Great individual person. I'm not yet to meet Zach or actually speak to Zach, but everything I've read about him, I think I can't wait to meet him in Atlanta for sure. But just talk to me about your pursuit of coaching and why, you would like kind of just tell anyone like, hey, if you really want to take it up, if you think you need it, why was it important for you to like have that?
Yeah. So first of all, yes, I would recommend that if you want to go to the next level, work with a coach. There are steps and plateaus when learning any skill. And when you are crushing your local game, when you're mastering your deck, I hit a plateau there. And I felt like the next step up was working with someone who knows this game a lot better than I do, because you might get to a point in your local community where maybe you're the person that knows the game the best. So, so with Zach, he's a great coach. He just started doing it, but the value for me, I'll just say, like, I finished my session with him and I felt kind of like, was that it? Like, I thought he was going to tell me some mystical wisdom, something I'd never heard. And it wasn't that at all. He didn't have some deep insight to the game that nobody's ever.
Right, A/B start.
Yeah. There was no Konami code there. Like if you watch, the Forbidden Mountain and you listen and you hear all this like great advice about the meta, like you're not going to get something fundamentally different from a coach. But what I found playing throughout the weekend is, like, first, a lot of little things he said to me really stuck in my brain and came out at the right moment in our games. Like a lot of like relevant, super specific situational things we talked about, like, happened. And I was like, oh my God, me and Zach talked about this. And I had the right play for it. But also, more than anything, working with a coach can help you get in that right headspace for competitive. I was so focused on practicing and tweaking my decks and my play lines and my matchups and all this stuff, and just being able to like word vomit to Zach all this stuff and get it out was so valuable. It was, I described it, it was like part coaching and part therapy session, just because like I had somebody there who was gonna listen to what I had to say about the game, and like their only goal was to help my game get better. That's super valuable.
I think that I'm pretty confident you said a very similar quote in the article about like this therapeutic experience of it. And it's really interesting to me because I think coaching is frowned upon in like life, in all honesty, and like, and this is through a certain eye, right? For me, I'll be the first one to tell anyone, I've had coaching for many things in life. Hell, I've had coaching for YouTube, right? Like something that people like don't even think about. But when you have that moment, when you have these like 1,000 questions, all you really want is the smallest of answers. And really what you want is a person to listen.
Yep.
And I think having a team is very crucial, right? Like having that atmosphere is great. And if you can kind of find a coaching within your own team, that's also kind of this great position you can be in. But this world where coaching is bad, it seems like such a frowned upon thing. And I don't understand it. Like professional athletes have coaches, Olympians have coaches. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like these people in life, the best players in any sport have a coach. You know,
Yeah.
like they might have 5 coaches, 6 coaches, 10 coaches for like every aspect of their life, right?
Right.
I mean, even like social media superstars, like they have coaches. Like it's things that
Mm-hmm.
like that if anyone is ever on the edge about how do I get better, I think that you'd be shocked what you can do. With my opinion, time is money, and what I will always say is that I value my time very well. So if I'm ever in a position, or whoever is in this position where they are the coach, they need to understand what they're worth as well.
Right.
But you have to understand as like a buyer what you are paying for, and you're like, you know what, I'm paying for this person that their whole job is to make me better.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I think it's something that's interesting.
I think you got to put your ego aside a little bit, right? Because you might feel this push of like this pushback of, well, Zach doesn't need a coach, or like my coach doesn't need a coach, and I can be just as good as them. Like it's not a sign of weakness at all if you want to improve your game by working with someone who's really good at the game. Like, and I have no shame that I paid Zach for his coaching time, because I got exactly what I paid for. Right.
Yeah.
Like I got somebody who knows the game better than me, who was willing to just sit there and listen and give me advice. And that's what I wanted. And it helped so much.
It's awesome to hear. So before we land the plane, the one particular subject that has come up over and over and over again the last few weeks in these very tiny tournaments were draws.
Right.
So I I want to approach this subject from the opposite end for a moment here.
Okay.
Let's start with this. Do you like that draws are in the game?
No.
Okay, cool. That's fine. In the rule book, right? In the official Ravensburger rule book, there's actually a rule set for games that go to time in eliminations rounds if the elimination rounds are timed. Specifically, this is to avoid the idea that you can't draw in a top 8 or a top 4 or the finals, yada, yada, yada. If that rule were always the rule and we could never have draws, would you like that better?
Well, I don't know the rule, but
so the rule is the most lore at the end of the game wins.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Well, doesn't that advantage decks that get lore fast?
Sure.
Is
that a bad thing though? That's my question.
There's no way.
So let's put it this way: isn't it the same grass that if like we go to time because my opponent's deck takes way longer for it to win, and therefore I'm kind of punished, right? Like, so if we look at both scales, there, I actually think it very much evens out.
You're right. Yeah. It's the same thing. Yeah. Would it be better if it was just whoever has more lore?
Not even would it be better if you just I know I'm totally throwing this at you.
It's really unfair
for me. But like, just like, would you like be interested in that world?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That was my first couple counterpunches here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how the community is so very frustrated at intentional drawing.
Yeah.
You played an event. You played it. Actually, I mean, you just told me you played in 8 events, right? So in many of those events, you were intentionally drawing because it was securing your spot in top 8s or top 4s. And there were a lot of players out there that were frustrated by the undefeated players doing this.
Right.
So from an experienced player and my mindset of it, here's the thing. It's within the rules of the game, right? And if it's within the rules of the game and it's in your best interest as a player, you should always do it. Like, it's literally the rules. So no one is breaking rules. No one is taking advantage of a system. Like, it is the rule. So while it can be frustrating from a player, on the outside looking in, it's the rules of the game. So it really is closer to a hate the game, not the player concept. But what are your feelings toward it overall after a couple weeks of kind of dealing with the community and this like bit of a problem.
So I didn't know that it was controversial even. Like
Okay.
that's how new I am to games. I did it because it made sense.
Yeah.
Like why play this game if I don't need to? You know,
Right.
like my very first event, the going into round 5, I was undefeated, no one else was, and I thought I don't need to play this game.
Yeah.
So I didn't. And I saved my energy. I had a snack and I got ready for the top 8. And it was only later that I realized how upsetting that was to so many people. That there was there's a potential that there's some math that if enough people draw, then other people who could have made top cut don't. But those people lost games and I didn't.
Right.
So it's hard to understand, like they would have had a chance to sneak in, but now they can't because of the draws. So I've been trying to wrap my mind around what's the problem with it and trying to understand every side of it, because people are very, very passionate about how much they hate
are. Absolutely.
draws. And I'm with you that like this is stated specifically in the rules of the game that this is something you can do. And it seemed you presented a hypothetical about just whoever has the most lore wins. Right. But before that, I was just thinking you can't stop a draw. We could play and draw. We could say we played and drew. Like you had the reason the rule exists that you can do it is because it even if that wasn't a rule, you could do it.
Right.
Like
ironically, if it wasn't a rule, it would actually be more collusion.
Yeah.
Which makes it even worse. The fact that it is a rule just makes it even less. And we even have a rule that has like specifically saying that you can't ask for it more than once.
Yes.
You know, so like there's layers to it in itself, which I think is very interesting. Yeah, I think the hardest thing for people to realize is that because of the way the first tiebreaker works in games, even if you started a tournament 0-2 and you ran it back and you were 4-2 and 4-2s made it, like on average, you're going to be the worst 4-2 in the room.
Yeah.
And the reason why that is because while every other player in the tournament, if that tournament player was 4-0 and his next 2 losses were against a 4-0 and a 3-1 or a 4-1, right? Their average game percentage is better than yours because you spent the whole tournament playing against 2-2s, 3-2s, 2-3s, 3-1. Like, you know, like people don't understand that's how tiebreakers work. So even though you might have the record, you know, like the actual point record to get into a top 8, the tiebreakers are never going to allow you to do it on average anyway. So the times that it actually happens where players find a way to sneak in based on tiebreakers are so very limited. And it's just one of those things of players need to understand how the actual tournament system works so they're less frustrated by it. And it's one of those where, like, in the end, the hardest honest truth is if you win early, you're rewarded for winning early. And if you lose early, you're just punished for it because the system will never benefit you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the hardest thing for players to grasp is that this idea that, like, by losing round 1, by losing round 2, like, you're putting yourself in a bracket that's below everyone that hasn't.
Yeah.
And I think that that's just something that, like, newer players on average have to understand and learn.
Well, and to give grace, like, how are they supposed to learn that? Because, like, Melee is not explaining any of that. No. It's just showing you a bunch of percentage numbers. Yeah. Like, it's a very arcane system.
Right.
But I think, the way you used to explain it is the simplest way. Like, the people at the top tables are the ones that are gonna bubble in.
Yeah.
If they didn't take those draws.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Almost always.
So the scenario where, like, the IDs stopped somebody who could have made it is so niche. That's such a rare thing.
Yeah.
Like, if you went 4-2, you weren't gonna make it.
Probably not.
Most of the time. Yeah.
Probably not.
Yeah.
It's a sad truth, but it's one of those where I just think that people do not honestly understand how the tournament works. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's really causing frustration. And it's just like a lack of information across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen so many tweets of people saying like, oh, I bubbled out because of so many people drawed. And it can't be that many people. That can't be that just, yeah. It's just such a rare thing.
Eric, I had such an incredible time this morning with you.
Me too.
Out, drinking some coffee, talking Disney Lorcana on a Tuesday morning. Is there anything else you'd like to discuss, sir, before we get out of here?
I'm just such a huge fan of you guys, Dan. So I appreciate you having me on. I've learned a lot from this channel. I love your meta reports. I love the interviews that you do with top players. And as somebody who's been learning this game and learning TCGs, it's been such a valuable resource, man. So thanks for doing what you do.
I appreciate that so much. I love these more than anything. It's my favorite thing to do in the game is talk to players that I haven't met yet, talk to players I do know, and in this way, and kind of like give them this opportunity to tell their story, tell their feelings and opinions. This is my favorite thing to do. I love having these conversations. I can't wait. I'm going to meet you in Atlanta, correct?
Yep.
It's going to be awesome. Are you Chicago also?
No Chicago.
No Definitely Chicago. Atlanta. All right, just Atlanta. That's okay.
Summer Games Fest. I got to work.
Summer Games Fest. Damn work.
I know.
Well, thank you so very much for hanging out this morning. And for everyone, if you haven't yet, make sure you check out Eric on Twitter. His link will be in the description below. And of course, check out The Gamer. Awesome stuff, awesome work all the time. Thank you guys so much. Catch you in the next one.